On September 17, 1862, the Battle of Antietam, Maryland, had ended inconclusively. But because Lee's invasion of the North had been stopped, Lincoln hailed Antietam a strategic victory. Union General George McClellan, however, failed to pursue Lee and his army as they retreated across the Potomac and back into Virginia. To President Lincoln's mind, this was the last straw in a mounting record of McClellan's overly cautious leadership. In early November, the president replaced him with Ambrose Burnside. On his part, Lee would make the most of his opportunity, there in his home state, at the battles of Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. Just before dawn on December 11, 1862, Fredericksburg, Virginia sat quietly along the Rappahannock River. General Ambrose Burnside sought a rapid crossing, and so his army engineers began laying pontoon bridges. The first shots at Fredericksburg came in the pre-dawn hours when sharpshooters in William Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade, situated in the abandoned buildings on the other side, opened fire on the engineers. Their repeated fire delayed the Union crossing for hours. Union troops eventually crossed, engaging in fierce urban combat. The Army crossed on December 11th and 12th, where the soldiers looted much of the abandoned town. Lee had positioned his army on strong defensive ground, anchored on the heights behind town. The terrain at Marye's Heights provided a near-perfect defensive position. Artillery officer Edward Porter Alexander described it. "A chicken could not live on that field when we opened on it." Burnside planned for William B. Franklin's 60,000 men to attack the Confederate forces under Stonewall Jackson, while the rest would target James Longstreet and his forces at Marye's Heights. On December 13th, Longstreet's troops held a deadly line behind a stone wall at the Sunken Road. Wave after wave of Union soldiers advanced across open ground and were cut down. General Edwin Sumner ordered repeated assaults. All failed. To the south, at Prospect Hill and Hamilton's Crossing, Union forces attacked Jackson's line. George Meade briefly broke through but could not hold it. Confederate generals James Longstreet and Lafayette McLaws held firm, reinforced by Jubal Early and Cadmus Wilcox. Union leaders Winfield Scott Hancock and Darius Couch pressed on but failed. Defeated, Burnside withdrew. Fredericksburg ended as one of the most lopsided losses in the war. Union forces suffered 12,500 casualties, more than twice the number among the Confederates. Nearly 5 months later, fighting shifted to Chancellorsville, a crossroads surrounded by dense forest called the Wilderness, which greatly limited visibility and made communication difficult. After his loss at Fredericksburg, Burnside had been replaced by Joseph Hooker, known as Fighting Joe Hooker. When he took over the Army of the Potomac, morale was low and desertion at an all-time high, 100 or more deserting each day. Hooker reorganized the Army, boosted morale, and dramatically slowed the desertion rate. In anticipation of crossing swords with his Confederate counterpart, the confident Union commander allegedly said, "May God have mercy on General Lee, for I will have none." Lee had left 10,000 of his men under the command of Jubal Early to hold Fredericksburg. He concentrated the rest near Chancellorsville, altogether about 50,000 rebel troops. By April 29th, more than 70,000 Union forces crossed the Rappahannock. Another 25,000 would join them before the 3-day battle was over. On May 1st, troops clashed at Zone Church. Lafayette McLaws and his rebels pushed Union forces back. Richard H. Anderson halted another advance. Hooker then made a critical mistake, ordering a withdrawal to Chancellorsville and allowing Lee to seize the initiative. On May 2nd, under Jackson's lead, 30,000 Confederate troops slipped into the dense woods and stealthily moved behind the Union lines. At 5 p.m., Jackson's men burst from the woods, screaming the rebel yell, then routing Union troops of the 11th Corps, commanded by Oliver Howard. They pushed Howard and the Corps back 2 miles. But that night, Lee suffered a severe loss. Intent to maintain the aggressive push against the Union forces, Stonewall Jackson and several of his officers rode out after dark to scout the terrain. They returned at a trot, and their arrival was mistaken for enemy cavalry. Around 9 o'clock to 9:15 p.m., Jackson was accidentally shot by his own men from the 18th North Carolina Infantry. He was struck 3 times, 2 in the left arm and 1 in the right hand. Shortly after midnight on May 3rd, Jackson's injured arm was amputated. When Lee heard the news, he replied, "He has lost his left arm, but I have lost my right." Jackson's command passed to Jeb Stuart, who kept up the aggressive attacks on the Union. Later in the day on May 3rd, Confederates broke through Union lines. Meanwhile, John Sedgwick advanced from Fredericksburg, threatening Lee's army from the rear. Lee sent a division to counterattack, which left only 25,000 Confederate troops to match Hooker's more than 70,000. On May 4th, Sedgwick was forced back by McLaws and Early. Hooker took little action himself that day. Worse yet, he ordered a withdrawal of a corps at Hazel Grove, which allowed Stuart and Lee to join their forces there and situate their artillery at high ground. Hooker kept 3 other Union corps idle during the day's battle. At one point, a Confederate cannonball struck Hooker's headquarters, stunning the commander and leaving him dazed. By battle's end, Hooker, whose forces had greatly outnumbered the rebel enemy, retreated across the Rappahannock. Chancellorsville proved to be Lee's greatest victory. When President Lincoln heard the news of Hooker's defeat, his response was a mix of shock over the loss and worry over the political fallout. My God, what will the country say?" As for Stonewall Jackson, in the aftermath of his surgery, he developed pneumonia from complications and exposure. He died May 10, 1863, at the Fairfield Plantation Office at Guinea Station, Virginia. His last words, "Let us cross over the river and rest under the shade of the trees." Jackson was buried in Lexington, Virginia, where he had taught before the war at Virginia Military Institute and where his widow, Mary Anna Jackson, and their daughter, Julia, lived. His amputated arm was buried separately at Elwood Manor, several miles from where he died.